Friends, today we are talking about the power of living with intention. Before we dive into that, please take a quick second to subscribe to LilyTube and be sure to hit the bell for notifications.
You know, Jeff, I just recently did a Lily Ladies group discussion on mindful and compassionate self-evaluation. And I have to say, it was really awesome to really ponder that subject deeply and then discuss it with such great women who have all done a lot of personal development in their lives. And we came together to take it to the next level, to live with even more intention. And when we're living with intention and with mindfulness, we can sometimes get stuck feeling bad about what we discover. You know, feeling a little shameful about maybe when we recognize, oh dear, I was creating something I didn't want with these thoughts that I've been running for years and years. Dang. And this is why compassion is so important, so vitally necessary when you're doing good personal development work and thought work as we try to help our coaching clients do.
You know, Cathy, I was thinking about this the other day when I happened to listen to a video by Matthew Hussey, who's this big dating expert. And he said, you know, in his typical accent, something like, self-care is not just lavender bubble baths. He said that self-care really is also about how we deal with things internally. And are we taking good care of our own thoughts and feelings? Are we moving forward as a human being and growing? And he puts self-care in that category as well.
Yes, and something I found to be more helpful than just doing self-care is doing so with mindfulness. Because when I step into the shower or the bath and work follows me in there, and I think of all the things I could be doing that might be more productive, I miss the opportunity to feel the water on my skin, to feel more peaceful and to go inward and get centered.
Right, and that's such a great opportunity that we have on a daily basis in the society that we're fortunate enough to live in, is we can have that daily cleansing ritual and we can feel that sort of enliven us. And Cathy could tell you that, you know, I'm not quite right in the morning until I have taken care of that.
And when we first got married, I was really surprised that compared to my, 10, 15 minute showers, his baths are like 2 hours.
Not every day.
But it's your preference.
My preference is about an hour, yeah.
I think your preference is longer than that. Let's get back to living with intention. We believe that intentional dating, intentional courtship, which is the book we wrote, it's an Amazon bestseller, and if you haven't got it yet, we highly, highly recommend you do if you are single and even thinking about dating. Maybe even if you're not ready to date, because it'll help you get ready. But intentional dating and courtship leads to intentional marriage.
Right. Intentionality is a really important subject for the people that we're talking to. Many of you are divorced or otherwise have been through relationship traumas in the past. Now, we know that people who have been divorced once, if they remarry, are, depending on the statistics you look at, have about a 65% divorce rate. And again, with the statistics, depending on statistics you look at, third marriages, about 73% divorce rate.
And we are on our third marriage, both of us.
Right.
3 times the charm for us. I mean, we're really happy, but I think a big part of that is because we're intentional and we focus on that 27% chance we've got.
Well, and to beat the odds, we believe that is about being very intentional about how we're going about our relationship. And that involves agreements that we make with each other. How are we going to handle relationships with opposite sex friends? How are we going to handle it when one or both of us is kind of emotionally flooded and the potential for a big argument is there? How are we going to do those things? And if we talk about those things in advance and make and keep our agreements together, Well, that's what living intentionally is about.
That's definitely what living intentionally in a relationship is about. Let's also talk about intention in life. How do we live intentionally in our lives?
Well, here's a relationship example, but it's really not an agreement with the partner, but an agreement with himself. John Gottman, who is one of the foremost authorities on marriage and relationships, many of you have probably heard of him. He has an agreement he has made with himself, which is essentially if Julie, his wife, if Julie is in pain, the world stops and I listen. And that's a maxim he lives by. Can you imagine how relationships would be different if every husband and every wife made that commitment to themselves about how they were going to behave toward their spouse?
So intentionally living life with or without a significant other would be making agreements about how you want to show up in life.
Right, and then striving very hard to keep those agreements. What is the alternative to living intentionally? It is being governed by emotion. You can either govern your relationship with emotion or intention. Now, if you govern it with emotion, it's going to be a hot mess. And just reacting and assuming that the feelings within us are justified because of what somebody else did, we got to remember those feelings originate within inside ourselves. Now, Viktor Frankl wrote a great book called Man's Search for Meaning. He was a psychologist, but also gained great insights as a prisoner in a Nazi concentration camp. One of the things he believed in, Viktor Frankl actually said, between stimulus and response, there is a space. In that space is our power to choose our response. In our response lies our growth and our freedom. And so stimulus, response, we think about that in terms of, Pavlov's dog. You can train a dog to start salivating whenever he hears the dinner bell because he knows he's about to be fed. And he'll start salivating even before he sees the food. And the idea is, well, we give you a certain stimulus, we condition you to respond in a certain way, kind of like a robot. And what Viktor Frankl said is between stimulus and response for human beings, there is a space. And in that space is where our freedom lies. And that is a profound idea. Now, how do we apply that in dating relationships or marriage relationships? Well, if there's something that Cathy does that particularly bothers me, I can respond emotionally or I can respond intentionally. I can decide in advance how I'm going to act, how I'm going to respond. And in making that decision intentionally, I have freedom to create a better and healthier relationship.
And a more joyful existence.
Absolutely. Why are we so driven by emotion? Well, there's a thing called trauma, and if you saw our earlier video about emotional sunburns, we talk about it in there. But trauma is, whether it's a lot of little small abuses and events or large traumas like, seeing your buddies die in war, whatever. Whether your traumas are small or large, they're stored in your body and in your mind. And when something reminds you of one of those places you've got a sore spot, figuratively speaking, you're going to hurt. And you're going to have an instinct to react, to just respond in a certain way according to emotion. And here's the thing, like we talked about that space. Well, one of the reasons that living intentionally can be challenging is there is an instinct to want to close that space and just respond in a haphazard or unintentional or even triggered kind of way when we have trauma surfacing, when we're triggered or flooded.
And it's not always in anger or an outward expression. Sometimes it's inward. Sometimes
you're imploding.
Yeah, exactly.
It could be that you just shut down. And that can also be very damaging to a relationship.
And to your own psychological well-being. So we encourage radical acceptance in any situation where you're tempted to ruminate and just go inside and just be so upset for days and days and days.
Right, so don't misunderstand us. We're not suggesting that you pretend to feel things you don't feel or to not feel things you do feel. We're not suggesting that. We believe in dealing with your feelings, and we believe in talking about the things that bother us if it's going to continue to bother us. I mean, if it's not going to matter tomorrow, don't worry about it. But if you know it's something that is going to bother you in the future, we're all for talking about it. Intentionality is how you do it.
How we decide to go about handling whatever we're dealing with.
Right.
Yeah.
And if, we've used this example a lot of times, if Cathy or I feels emotionally flooded, either of us can call a timeout and the discussion stops immediately. No last words, no parting shots, just stop, pause. And then we come back together, between 20 minutes and usually a few hours later, and we are resolved to talk about it. And you know what? When neither of us is flooded, we can resolve it in 5 or 10 minutes instead of 5 or 10 hours.
Which wouldn't be resolving it, it would just be causing damage.
Right. In fact, why don't you give the statistic about what happens when people's heart rate reaches 100 beats per minute?
The percentage of being able to solve a problem when one or both people have their heart rates risen, whether our heart rate is high because we're exercising or because we're emotionally flooded, it's the same thing. The percentage of chance of solving a problem during that moment, 0.
Big goose egg. And that's a John Gottman study as well. So why continue a discussion when you're just going to say things that hurt each other and that make you feel icky inside? There is sort of a fight or flight response that can kick in those moments where you either shut down, you leave the room or the house, or you sit there and fight back and forth. Well, none of those are healthy ways of dealing with it. What can you do? You can be intentional. You can decide, okay, this is the procedure we're going to follow when we're not thinking straight.
And when we follow those procedures, it's like divorce-proofing your marriage. So for those of you who are married, or people who are married and you think this advice would be good for them, honestly, I can't think of any better counsel for divorce-proofing marriage.
Right. It is a way to help create a safe space for you and your partner to interact and discuss sensitive things. So what do we do when we feel trauma coming up? Well, a couple of things are important to bear in mind. Number one, we want to recognize it when it comes up. So while you're learning about yourself in this way, try to pay attention and take intentional note of, oh, I am now feeling triggered. I mean, that sounds funny to say that, but if you can know when it's coming up and where that gut level reaction is coming from, it's easier to say, all right, I'm triggered right now. I'm flooded. So maybe I need to take a break and self-soothe, take care of my own needs for a minute. Whether you're with a partner or in a crowd or whatever, understanding what is happening when trauma comes up is the first step to being able to manage it in a way that's healthy and effective.
Something I've really come to believe, Jeff, is that whenever something comes up for me in an emotional trigger and I'm feeling flooded, it means it's ready to heal. It means that it's a new layer of something I've dealt with in the past. Maybe it's something I've already healed a lot of, but there's just a new layer, just a new little layer, and it doesn't have to be threatening, it doesn't have to be scary, it can actually be a gift. It can be a gift, and we can know that if it comes up, it's ready to be healed.
And we can handle it in a way that is, to use the theme of our video, intentional. Healing and happiness are within your reach, friends. If you'll join us in living with more intention and mindfulness, we'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments, and hope this video motivates all of us to live with more intention and purpose, actively creating our own life experience. Remember that any time is a great time for more love in your life. Thank you for watching.